Hey y'all, this is Sean, and this is my Razer Blade 15 base model review. Now, I'm a guy that's been using convertibles for years now, such as the Surface Pro 4, Surface Book 1, and now the Surface Book 2 13-inch, which is currently my main machine, for getting work done and doing some light gaming on the go. Now, I do have a gaming desktop at home for getting my more intense workloads done and doing some more hardcore gaming when I am at home. However, two things have changed. One, I'm not at home as much as I used to be, and two, my workload needs and gaming needs have changed for when I'm on the go. This begins my journey into looking into the more powerful, stylish standard laptops. The one thing that I'm afraid of giving up is the Surface Book 2's versatility, the detachable screen, the touch screen, and the pen. So I've been used to that for years now, so I'm looking for a machine that can take care of all of my other gaming and workload needs for me to give up that versatility. And this begins with the Razer Blade 15 base model. Is it enough to pull me away back from the versatile form factor of the Surface Book 2? Well, we shall see. So starting with the outside of the laptop, we have a quite beautiful all black matte metal chassis, incredibly rigid, incredibly durable. The only problem I have with this is, as you can see on the screen, it picks up fingerprint oils like there's no tomorrow due to the matte black finish, which means you'll probably be reaching for your microfiber cloth or something, eyeglasses cleaning cloth, fairly frequently. It should typically take out most of it. If not, just wet it, damp it a little bit, and you'll be able to wipe all of it off. Now, this logo back here is not RGB, it is actually LED, and unfortunately it's not independently controlled through any of the Razer software. On the base model, it's tied to the screen brightness, so be adjusted. Unfortunately, you can't just turn it off, as some people will like to have the logo completely turned off and not be flashing green if you're, let's say outside or whatever the case is. On the left side of the laptop, you have your barrel pin connector, which allows it for charging. Ethernet port, you don't see this on a lot of laptops nowadays. Two USB-A ports, combo, headphone, and microphone audio jack. And on the right side, you have a Kensington lock slot if you want to lock this down. This is an expensive machine after all. Mini display port, regular size HDMI, another USB-A port, and a USB Type-C Thunderbolt 3 port. And now moving on to the inside, for those of you who really care about this, it does indeed pass the one-hand opening test, and as you can see, loads up pretty quickly. The display option that we get with the Razer Blade 15 base model is a 1920 by 1080p Full HD 60 Hz display. Now, the colors might be coming through quite punchy and saturated, but I can assure you that when you're looking at this in person, the colors aren't in your face, overly saturated. They're actually quite nice to look at, and I do have a gaming monitor and I do know what washed out colors look like. This display is definitely significantly nicer in terms of color quality and color accuracy than my gaming monitor. Typically, I have the brightness set to about 50%. It gets me through almost every indoor scenario that I've been to. Sometimes when I have to go outside or I'm sitting in the sun, I'll punch this up to 75%. 80% brightness, but typically around 50% will get me through almost every scenario. Now on the bottom section here, you have two upward facing speakers that get pretty loud and are pretty clear, especially when you're playing video games or you're listening to music. Now, when you set it to 100%, you're going to get a little bit of scratching, as typically what happens when you have smaller speakers, but if you set it to around 90-95%, you should be perfectly fine. Now, the typing experience on the keyboard itself is very low travel keys. You feel them bottoming out a lot quicker than I have on like my other laptops, such as my Surface Book 2 and the other laptops that I've owned as well. One other thing to also note is I noticed the initial activation force to push down the key is a lot more, and it actually caught me by surprise when I first started typing on this, as I would make some typos and maybe miss a letter here and there. But to initially get the key to punch down and register takes a considerable more force than I'm used to. A gripe that I have with this keyboard should be glaringly obvious is that there's a function key on the right side of the arrows. I don't know whose idea it was to do this, but I've constantly tried to hit the right arrow and now I end up hitting function, wanting to hit the down arrow, I'm hitting right arrow. And I don't know who did this, but this setup right here where the three arrows and then the shift and function flanking it on the right, that's not something that I'm a big fan of.
Oh yeah, and the keyboard is RGB and completely customizable through the Razer Synapse software. As you can see, I'm a fan of purple.
Now the trackpad is really nice. It's a glass trackpad using Windows Precision drivers. Thank you very much for that one, as it has all the major 3, 4, 2-finger gesture controls and whatnot. Now the only thing that I have a gripe with the trackpad with it being so huge is as someone who types, I use my right thumb to try to tap the right button when I need to on the screen, and it just took a little bit more of getting used to kind of reaching my thumb a little bit further back just to get that right click. The good part is that when you do click it, not too loud, which is really nice. For the specs of the machine, we have an Intel Core i7-8750H processor, which is a 6-core, 12-thread processor. Not to be confused with the Intel Core i7U series of processors, which has a 4-core, 8-thread, and is 15 watts. This has 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM and has a two storage system. One is an SSD, the other one is an HDD. The SSD in here I have is a 128 gigabyte Light-On branded SSD. It's actually kind of small. And then a 1 terabyte, unfortunately, 5400 RPM hard drive. More on that later. It has a 65 watt-hour battery and a GTX 1060 Max-Q edition. Now the Max-Q edition is the laptop series of GPUs from NVIDIA that what they typically do is cut down about 10% of the performance or so to help with thermals, as you can see, it's a very thin laptop. To showcase some gameplay performance, I'm starting off with Apex Legends. I used the recommended settings from NVIDIA GeForce Experience, which set everything between low to medium. As this is a 60 Hz panel, VSync was turned on, and I was able to hit 60 FPS easily. But when you first drop off the ship, it would dip to the high 40s to mid 50s, then go back to 60 FPS. It is not shown too well here, but I did notice a significant amount of stuttering in between open areas while running and fighting scenes, which that part makes sense, but then it would go back to normal shortly after. Overall, it was a fairly smooth gameplay experience. Sea of Thieves was a phenomenal gameplay experience. I had the game set to the rare preset, and as you can see, I'm easily able to hit over 60 frames a second. However, the only problem with that is because this is a 60 Hz panel, anytime a game typically runs over 60 FPS, you're going to notice screen tearing, which I notice and it bothers me a lot. So for me, I had to turn VSync on or I frame rate capped it back to 60 FPS. On to a more busy fight scene where I'm trying to take down some skeletons to acquire the loot to sell back to the Order of Souls. As you can see, the gameplay is between 59 to 60 FPS and was a smooth and phenomenal experience. Now, bringing back the 5400 RPM drive. For this game, I noticed it took forever for this game to load. I was seeing load screens and hearing load music that I've never even heard of, as well this is coming from someone who installs games on SSDs back on his desktop computer. So the only thing that hindered this for me was the incredibly long load times. Was 1, getting the game started, and 2, jumping into a session with my brother and my friends. Now when you are gaming and pushing the GPU, it typically gets hot around this area. The one thing I did appreciate is that Razer built in really thick feet underneath the laptop to raise it off of the surface. As you can see here, there's a fairly sizable gap there to allow for a lot more airflow, which did help with making the machine a little less toasty. For video editing performance, my test was done on an 11-minute QHD 60 FPS clip, and as you can see, the Razer Blade did it in 40 minutes, whereas my Surface Book 2 did it in 51 minutes. the Razer Blade 15 effectively reduced my export times by about 20%, which is a fairly sizable margin. And this leads me to my conclusion. Was the Razer Blade 15 enough to pull me away from the Surface Book 2 13-inch? Well, first, quick comparison. Core i7, 6-core, 12-thread processor. Core i7, quad-core, 8-thread processor. Mo cores, mo power. 16 gigabytes of RAM, 16 gigabytes of RAM. 128 gigabyte SSD, 1 terabyte extremely slow HDD, 512 gigabyte SSD, GTX 1060 Max-Q, GTX 1050. Now, overall, between the two machines, the Razer Blade has the specs over the Surface Book 2. Video editing performance was better on this, gaming performance was better on this, and just overall, the two main things I'm going to be doing was better on the Razer Blade. However, for me, it looks like I'm going to be keeping the Surface Book 2 rather than the Blade. Two reasons. The first reason is, when I was gaming, I don't know if it was noticeable on the video, one, load times to get into games was ridiculously slow. Now, that might just be me yearning for more, as I do have a gaming desktop at home, and I do want my games to pretty much load like that. So that's more of a personal preference, at least on my end. But then also, in between, when I was playing games, I would notice some stuttering, whether it was in, actually it was in all the games. I would notice stuttering when I was moving around, and that was new to me. I didn't really see that anywhere else when I was on any other system that I've used. There's no way it was the Wi-Fi or the LAN for me, because all my other machines was working perfectly fine, internet was working fine. I think it's because of the storage. So I'm gonna say, well, Sean, why didn't you just put it on the SSD? The SSD in this machine is ridiculously small. After the 128 gigabytes, after formatting and Windows, I think you maybe have less than 90 gigabytes left on this. So with one game, maybe some programs, I was barely able to store anything on that SSD. So I had to resort to the really slow hard drive in this. I don't know why 5400 RPM hard drives are still being used. I guess it's for cost, maybe. But to me, drive is slow, and that's what I think caused maybe some of the stutters, and I know it caused the extremely long load times when getting into games. The second reason why I'm deciding to keep my Surface Book over the Blade is because of the price that I paid. Okay, again, your mileage may vary, but for me, the Surface Book 2 I paid $1,500 for. The Razer Blade I paid $1,600 for. Now, based off of that $100 cost difference, I expect the performance of the Blade to be a lot better than the Surface Book 2. But for that price difference, I would gladly take the touchscreen and the pen over the standard laptop form factor in this case. My guess is, had the storage been completely swapped out, I probably would have maybe stuck with the Blade. But that was the one thing that was really hindering it for me. As one, I don't like long load times. Two, I had to store a lot of the video editing files on there as well, so it did stutter some of the video editing on it. And the price just didn't justify it for me. Now, if we're going MSRP, the Surface Book 2, this one is over $2,000. My configuration costs over $2,000. I believe actually it's $2,500, $2,500, $2,600. Brand new. Blade, $1,600 brand new. I will gladly take the Blade over this, because for a $900 delta, I wouldn't pay an additional $900 if I was mainly looking for video and gaming performance over the Razer Blade. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and that's not how it worked out for me. But does this make the Blade a bad system? No, it doesn't. I like it for the price, and I would gladly recommend it to those that are looking for a thin and light gaming laptop to do video editing on the go. It's a nice, sleek machine aside from the fingerprints, and it plays games very well. It's light, it's portable. Why wouldn't you want something like that? But, at least for me, wasn't enough price-wise for what I paid again to pull me away from the Surface Book 2. So it looks like the search continues. But I do have another system coming in, so we'll see if that one is enough to pull me away from the Surface Book 2. So we shall see on that end. And that's a wrap for this video. Please, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, hit subscribe so I'm able to bring you more videos. Now, I am new to this, and I am learning this as I go along. So please leave a comment in the comment section below for constructive criticism. I'm completely open to this. I do want to get better, and more things that people want to see and the more things that I can improve on, please let me know. So I'm gonna leave you with this. With your tech, with anything else that you do, have fun.